Wait, did that sound just unlock a core memory you forgot you had? Look, everyone talks about Y2K fashion making a comeback, the low-rise jeans, the metallic everything, those chunky highlights we all pretend never happened. But here's what nobody's discussing: the sounds. The actual auditory landscape that defined our digital childhood is vanishing into silence, and most people don't even realize what we've lost. I'm talking about an entire symphony of technological nostalgia that's sitting right there in your subconscious, waiting to transport you back to a time when the internet felt infinite and mysterious, when getting online was an event, not a given. Think about it. When was the last time you heard the Windows 98 startup chime? Not in a meme, not in a TikTok throwback, but actually heard it because someone was booting up their computer? When did you last experience that specific anticipation of dial-up connecting, that mechanical symphony of digital handshakes that meant you were about to enter cyberspace? These weren't just background noise, they were the soundtrack to our digital awakening. And here's the fascinating part that's going to blow your mind. Most of these iconic sounds have origin stories that are absolutely wild, rooted in everything from 19th century classical music to pure technological accident. Let me take you on a journey through the forgotten soundscape of the early internet, because trust me, by the end of this, you're going to understand why hearing a Nokia ringtone in 2025 hits different than any song ever could. The Nokia ringtone, you know, the one that dum that was literally everywhere from 1994 to about 2007. This sound was played an estimated 1.8 billion times per day at its peak. But here's what's absolutely mind-bending: that tune isn't some corporate jingle created in a boardroom. It's actually a phrase from Gran Vals, a classical guitar composition written by Francisco Tárrega in 1902. Picture this: a Spanish guitarist sits down in 1902, nearly a century before mobile phones exist, and composes a piece that will become the most recognized melody in human history. Nokia's sound designers stumbled upon this public domain gem and thought, yeah, this captures the essence of communication. They had no idea they were creating what would become the sonic signature of an entire generation. But why does this matter? Why do these sounds hit us so differently than, say, the iPhone notification sound? Dr. Annabel Cohen's research at the University of Prince Edward Island on music and memory shows us something crucial. Sounds that accompany significant life experiences become neurologically hardwired to those emotions. The dial-up modem sound isn't just noise, it's the auditory equivalent of a time machine, because it's tied to moments of genuine anticipation and discovery. Remember waiting for that modem to connect? That wasn't frustration, that was excitement building. You were literally listening to your computer having a conversation with the world. Those screeches and beeps? That was your machine saying, "Hello, Internet, I'm here, let me in." And when it finally connected, that silence that followed meant infinite possibility. The Windows startup sounds tell an even more interesting story. Brian Eno, yes, the legendary ambient music composer, created the Windows 95 startup sound. Microsoft gave him one requirement: make something that sounds optimistic, futuristic, sentimental, and emotional in 3.25 seconds. The man who basically invented ambient music was tasked with distilling the promise of personal computing into a brief audio logo. But here's where it gets really interesting and where the opposing perspective emerges. Some researchers argue that our nostalgia for these sounds isn't really about the sounds themselves. Dr. Krystine Batcho's work on nostalgia psychology suggests that we're not missing the dial-up screech, we're missing the simplicity, the anticipation, the sense that technology was still magical rather than mundane. Think about it. We had to wait for the internet. We had to choose when to go online. There was a ritual to it. Loading a single image took minutes, so every photo felt precious. Email was special because it wasn't constant. The "You've Got Mail" notification voiced by Elwood Edwards in his living room for $200, by the way, represented genuine surprise and connection, not just another interruption. Maybe what we're really nostalgic for isn't the sounds, but the relationship we had with technology, when it required patience, when it had personality, when it made noise instead of sliding silently into our consciousness. But I think both perspectives capture something true. These sounds were powerful because they marked moments of transition and anticipation. The technology had friction, and that friction created meaning. Every beep, chime, and screech was your computer communicating with you, telling you something was happening. Compare that to today. Our devices are essentially silent unless something goes wrong. Progress is measured by seamlessness, by the absence of effort or delay. We've gained efficiency but lost ceremony, character, the sense that our technology has personality. The MSN Messenger notification sound, that simple ding-dong, could make your heart race because it meant someone you cared about was thinking of you. Instagram notifications? They're designed to be ignored, filtered, managed. But that MSN sound? That meant genuine human connection was waiting. And here's something that's genuinely fascinating from a cultural perspective. These sounds created shared experiences across the globe. A kid in Tokyo and a teenager in Toledo heard the exact same Windows startup chime. The same Nokia ringtone interrupted classes from Sao Paulo to Stockholm. We had a genuinely global sonic language for the first time in human history. Now our sounds are personalized, algorithmic, constantly shifting. We've gained customization, but lost that shared cultural touchstone. There's no modern equivalent to everyone recognizing the ICQ uh-oh sound or the AIM door opening and closing. But maybe the most beautiful part of this whole story is how accidental it all was. Nobody set out to create the soundtrack of digital nostalgia. Francisco Tárrega wasn't composing for Nokia users. Brian Eno wasn't thinking about millennial childhood memories. The dial-up modem sound was just the byproduct of digital communication protocols. Yet these accidental compositions became more emotionally powerful than most intentional music. They became the involuntary soundtrack to our technological coming of age. And now, as we move toward completely silent interfaces, voice commands, gesture controls, brain-computer interfaces, these sounds are becoming archaeological artifacts of a very specific moment in human history. So the next time you hear that dial-up modem sound in a video, or someone's retro Nokia ringtone goes off, pay attention to what happens in your chest. That little flutter of recognition and longing? That's not just nostalgia, that's your brain accessing a specific time when technology felt like magic, when going online was an adventure, when our digital tools had voices and personalities and demanded our patience. Which raises some pretty wild questions, doesn't it? As we move toward completely seamless, silent technology, what are we gaining and what are we losing? Will Gen Alpha feel the same nostalgic pull toward whatever sounds define their childhood, or are we the last generation that will associate technology with specific, memorable audio signatures? And here's the really mind-bending thought. What if the Y2K sound aesthetic represents the last time in human history when our technology was genuinely audible, when machines made noise not as malfunction, but as communication? Are we witnessing the end of an era where our tools have voices? What do you think? What Y2K internet sound hits you the hardest? And more importantly, what does it make you remember about who you were when you first heard it?